It's an interesting topic, and it's such a timely topic, I must say. Resilience in the NGO sector, especially after, as mentioned earlier, with the USA and everything, with just a simple change in government. It wasn't a change in a democratic process or anything. It was just a change in government through voting, which is done every 4 years in a country, right? Um, I have a slightly different take on that. And I hate using the word being the devil's advocate, but if you allow me to for just 5 minutes, I was looking at the numbers when I was making these slides. I was looking at the numbers, and over the past 50 years, $100 trillion have gone into developing countries from developed nations to counter poverty and other issues such as these related to them. Um, if you give $100 trillion to any privately run company with shareholders, which is working towards stakeholder maximization, we probably would have been living in Mars by now, right? We would have had colonies in Mars or something, right? I'm just going to assume that we would have done that, right? Um, Anyone, and you can, maybe I'm not as knowledgeable as some of you, if someone can tell me where the world collectively has, using even a percentage of that money, reduced poverty in a country, I would love to know, using aid, not other avenues. So I mean, it is a good point when you have things like these in an industry for introspection, right? Where things can be better, how things can be done in a better way. I'm going to look at something which is leveraging technology, which Dr. Pratash also, delved into, especially blockchain, which was very interesting to listen to. But encountering rural inequality. And I'm going to highlight opportunities rather than telling you what to do, right? And then I'm just going to use a case study of how we think, or how I think what we should have done or what we're doing, and how what I'm doing in one of the projects I'm working on. Now, if you look at the world map, right? And this is the world map for financial exclusion, the unbanked, people who don't have access to financial resources. A couple of things are very interesting that come to mind. One, of course, is that it's the global south. But if you look at the countries in this map, you'd see that most of them are agri-based, right? Even the communities, right? Even if the countries are not agri-based, the communities where you have the least level of financial inclusion are agri-based. And another very interesting thing which people kind of, miss out is that, minus Latin America, if you look at all the countries, they have a very significant Muslim population. And this is where I think we could leverage technology and even Islamic finance, because, as for some of you who might not know, in Islam, interest-based lending is not allowed. So you have to go using partnership-based lending. So maybe one of the reasons of financial exclusion is that we haven't approached them through what they're comfortable with, right? Now I'm going to use another map of the world to show you something even more interesting. This is for corn. So I used corn as a yield gap and potential analysis. So this shows you the yield gap in countries. Specifically for corn, I could have used anything. I used corn here. And the yield gap means the difference between the actual yield minus the attainable yields. So the ones which are red, closer to red, are having the biggest gap. So they could have had more, but at the moment, their actual yields are far less than what they can attain. And if you look at both the maps, if you compare both the maps, you would see where you have lower levels of financial inclusion is where you have the highest yield gaps, right? And I can show you this in numbers. The world has an approximate average yield gap of 1.65 tons when it comes to corn, which means that it is producing this is per hectare, not total, of course, but per hectare or per acre. So the world on average produces 1.67 tons less than it could. But countries like Burundi have a 4.75 trillion advantage they could benefit from, which they're not. And these are countries with low levels of financial inclusion. So that got me thinking that, and this is something I've been thinking for 2 years now, or 1.5 years. Is there something, as NGOs, as banks, as governments, we're missing out? Are we completely ignoring the biggest cog in the piece of financial inclusion, which is small scale farmers? And that's where I'm going to show you a case study. I'm going to use Pakistan as a case study because that's where we're launching a pilot. and that's where I'm from. So no one can say I'm saying bad about any other country. I'm just talking about my own country. If you look at Pakistan's GDP, which is about $400 billion, give and take, 20%, and this is excluding the black part of the economy, right? This is the documented part of the economy. $400 billion GDP, about 20% of it is agriculture. Pakistan is about 60 to 65% rural population, and 40%, which is 88 million people, are indirectly or directly employed in agriculture. By the way, I'm talking about Pakistan, but as most of you would know, this is across developing countries. This isn't something specific to Pakistan. This can be any developing country in the global south, which is agri-based. And one of the most interesting things, which when I saw in the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, was that almost 80% of farmers are small-scale farmers, who are cultivating on 1 to 15 acres or less than 15 acres of land. And those are the ones which we need to approach, because imagine if we make them even 20% more efficient in the way they do things, they increase their yields, give them the right tools, then the 20% GDP which it has, it can have a multiplier effect not only on them, the productivity of a nation. They can have disposable income which they can use for better health, better education for their kids, and just have an entire multiplier effect on the country. And then you can imagine if we start doing it across the world, this food security, which everyone talks about these days, how much better we can approach food security. If we look at Pakistan and wheat, so wheat is one of our, let's say, the crop, because we eat in our diet a lot of wheat, roti, or bread, as some people would know. And I want to compare it to a country, which is really the benchmark for agriculture, which is the Netherlands, right? So in Pakistan, the real yield currently is 3.51 tons per hectare. And in Netherlands, which is a very small country compared to Pakistan and has a very colder, harsher weather, some would argue, has a 9.39 ton per hectare yield currently. What's more interesting is that Pakistan has a 4.76 ton per hectare attainable yield, right? So this means that if you compare other countries with the same climate, soil type, XYZ, so Pakistan could reach a potential of 4.76. What's interesting is Netherlands is 8.5. So its real yield is more than its attainable yield. So using technology, leveraging best practices, they're actually growing more than their attainable yield. Now imagine if we can somehow facilitate small-scale farmers to go beyond what they can. Imagine how, on a global level, the impact we can have. This is something, and this is something back to financial inclusion. This is from 2017, and Pakistan was really doing not too great when it comes to the ranking in financial inclusion. Mind you, this is from the World Bank, but it's from 2017, and Pakistan was in number 132. Now, this is a country which has exported bankers to the Middle East, North America, Europe, right? And this country has ranked as 132 in the world, right? But what has happened using technology, especially post-COVID, really, what COVID had showed us a lot of bad things, but there were some really good things, interesting things that happened post-COVID or during COVID. And technology is changing financial inclusion. Just from 2022 to 23, the volume of transactions grew by 29%. Both and 21%, 21 to 29% in terms of the value, and 21% in terms of volume. Mobile banking has increased by 30%, and internet banking has increased by 15%. But what's most interesting is the digital wallets, e-wallets, where I can transfer some small amount to another person's digital wallet. That has, over the year from 22 to 23, increased up to 450%. And the trend, as you can see from 2019, financial year 2019 to 23, is just upward, but it's exponentially upward, So this is where, and this is just Pakistan. We all know what M-Pesa did and how it changed the landscape in Kenya and other African countries. So this is where I strongly believe that if we leverage technology, we can reap great benefits. And this is why at my time at Harvard and at the Harvard Innovation Labs, I incubated Bagh-e. which is tackling financial inclusion and low yields using technology. And we do two simple things. We give digital credit in a partnership-based model, not an interest-based model. And I'll come on to not just from an Islamic finance perspective, but I'll come on to why we do that at the end. And we give technical assistance to improve yields. And all of it is done through technology, leveraging technology. Not that people have to come to us and we have an office in the city. People come to us and we give them something. And this is all done using technology. So what does Bagh-e do? And I'm going to just give you 3 or 4 slides of how we do it at the Bagh-e app. Based on the onboarding process looks like, based on the geolocation of the farm and the soil type and the water type, the user is shown, depending on what month it is, the crops he or she can grow on their land. So as you can see, they're given like tomatoes, maize, onions. Now, let's assume that he or she clicks on tomatoes, that they want to grow for the next crop cycle, tomatoes. They click on tomato, they make a schedule. Bagh-e, based on the weather patterns, gives you a step-by-step weekly schedule of best practices you as a farmer need to do to ensure optimal yield. So it will say, based on this weather and based on the fact that you've chosen tomato, this week is most optimal for you to do sowing. The next week is most optimal for you to put in, let's say, urea or whatever inputs are required. Now, another interesting thing I mentioned earlier is we're giving digital credit. We're not giving money, because that can manage risk. We have to manage the risks of our, sponsors or donors and small-scale farmers. As much as I don't want to say it, but it's seen by a lot of donors or financial institutions as a risky investment, right? If you just give them cash. So to counter that, and this is not much about Khalid saying it, this is how, when we've had meetings and stuff with banks and financial institutions and sponsors, this is their perception, that if you give them money, because they don't have the know-how on financial literacy, they can use that money in the most efficient manner. So to counter that, we give them digital credit. Now, what does that mean? Now, let's say this schedule tells you on, let's say, the 24th, you need 3 bags of urea per acre or per hectare, whatever country you're in, right? A QR code is generated, right? The farmer takes that QR code to the closest supplier, so our approved vendors. So we have partnership with different vendors. We're running a pilot in Pakistan with Syngenta, which is one of the largest input providers of agriculture in the world. So they'd go to the closest approved vendor, they'd show the QR code, the supplier using his Bagh-e app will scan the QR code, the app will tell it, yes, on this to this person, you need to give 3 bags of urea, let's say, or fertilizer. So the 3 bags are given, pictures are taken to record the transaction, and the farmer's on his or her way. And that's how we're managing the let's say leakages of or managing the risk of financing small scale farmers. Then we give them access to consultant 24/7. So through the app, they can call them through send them an SMS, request a call as well if they don't have enough money or top up. So they can request a call from the consultant, and this is so the consultants can hold their hand through the process. So if they're confused about something, they can call our consultant. And this, at the end, what we do is we take like all of this produce from all these small scale farmers, we collate it and then sell it in bulk, right? So that gives us bargaining power, rather than small scale farmers with 1 acre, 5 acres, 3 acres going to these mills and trying to bargain with them and getting literally having their arm twisted into accepting a rate which is lower than market, which is, by the way, sometimes practices, unfortunately, not just in Pakistan, in a lot of developing countries. What we give them is bargaining power. So these mills have one point of contact, which is us, and we have all these farmers who we represent. And at the end, the model is simple. We have a profit share. 70% goes to the farmer, 30% goes to Bagh-e. We're not a charity, but we're a non-profit / impact startup. So we do put most of the money back to run the cycle. And from the 70% of the farmers, share. 20% reserve is made to serve as crop insurance, and 10% as it goes towards education expenses for the children of farm workers. And the reason I said, remember I told you why we're doing a partnership model and not interest-based? One was Islamic finance, but the other is that we only make money if farmers do well. If we're doing a partnership model and we're doing a percentage share of profits, it's in our best interest to ensure those profits are increasing, so we also generate more revenue, so we can run more operations, right? So every time we as a team think of ways that small scale farmers can be more efficient, because it's not just for them, it's also benefiting us. And not to sound like a complete capitalist here, it's just a model which works for both parties, right? And it's not eventually we want to be sustainable. We don't want to be reliant on donors. And from the beginning, because we're selling it to mills, this is a model which from the beginning is profitable and sustainable. Now that's something which I've mentioned